You are now listening to PODCORN, episode 23, for September 4th, 2013.
Such a free, such a free, such a free, such a free, such a free. Coming to my blind soul. Coming to my blind soul. Coming to my blind soul.
I'm Amy Reeder, and I'm here with Brandon Bmontclare. This is PODCORN, the comics podcast. Each Wednesday, after we've been to the local comic shop, we're broadcasting from the heart of Greenwich Village, NYC. September is here with the sounds of summer and the city start to fall. Bustling students starting the school year, eager to learn something new. Leaves sere and hot chestnut vendors return from their reverse hibernation. Join us, won't you?
Yeah. I know I said don't read it first, just do it, but you were very disingenuous.
How am I supposed to be genuine?
The only way that this is funny is if you play it straight. And if then, maybe not even.
Okay. Well, sorry I failed once again.
Yeah.
Welcome to PODCORN, guys.
Yeah.
We're
doing a top 10 list.
Yeah. Because we're kind of copying Grace Randolph a little bit.
Yeah, because she invented the top 10 list.
No, but she does that a lot, and they're always really good. She does like a YouTube show. You should see it if you don't already. And
right.
And yeah, so we thought that we'd do like the top 10 things that we end up saying to people who are aspiring to get into the biz, right? Because they all show us their stuff. And and this was kind of my idea, because like I feel like I keep repeating myself, and that's fine. I'm always happy to tell people. But maybe this is something that if you never get a chance to show me your portfolio or somebody your portfolio, at least I've got some advice for you that seems to be relatively common.
Yeah, we're gonna do some writing and some art stuff.
Yeah.
But it's more than just like take this advice. It's also interesting what tends to get repeated, and I'm of two minds. One, there's a lot of common mistakes, and two, I mean, I'd say editors, but anybody giving a critique sometimes falls. You have, as someone who's done a lot of portfolio reviews and a lot of submission stuff, you have to be careful that you don't just kind of go to the checklist and say, oh, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
that's true too. Like everybody, something you should realize when you get advice from
like,
people is that everybody does have their own baby, their own thing that they like to tell everybody.
Right. At Tokyo Pop, people used to make stuff up, and then the boss would make stuff up, Stu Levy, because he'd heard it someplace, but he wouldn't get it quite right. You know.
Yeah.
And then he would give a presentation on it, and then it would get further lost in the translation, literally lost in the translation, because it'd be some wisdom from Japan mangaka.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people at Tokyo Pop would just kind of say, "Oh, okay, now that's what we have to do," and
Well, they had no frame of reference except what Stu Levy had to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were the days.
Crazy. Yeah. So I feel that a lot of times when people give advice to artists, they're like super specific. They're like, "Oh, there's a tangent here," or something.
Right.
Or your anatomy's off, your perspective's off, and I feel like those second two are like almost like too sweeping, and then some things are too specific. But I think it's good to come up with some overall advice that's also something that you can do something with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we got 10 and they're all over the map.
Yeah.
But we wrote them out, so
Yeah. So what's number 10?
Number 10 is Amy and I both picked 5, so I'll start, right? Mm-hmm. And number 10 is just kind of general advice, is to always remember that it's just comics, Mm-hmm. It's not the most complicated thing in the world, and it's not the hardest thing to get into. It's very competitive. You have to be very patient. You have to, and I say this a lot, you have to be lucky in the sense that you avoid bad luck if you want to break into the business. Uh-huh. You know what I mean? But if you're good and you're persistent, you'll keep getting better, and sooner or later you'll probably wind up in comics in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? So you can't be mystified by anything, and kind of like it's not playing center field for the Yankees. It's not rocket science, you know.
No, that's good advice.
It's just a matter of it's not even calm down. It's like you're good enough. You know what I mean? It's like you have to be a good writer, a great artist, or a decent mind for editing, or whatever you want to be in comics.
Yeah.
You know? But it can be done, and if you apply yourself, you know, it's great. And look, you know, you started drawing at 22 years old, something like that.
Yeah, 24. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked in a comic shop until like my late 20s, and then I went back to school and was like an intern at 27 or whatever it was at Tokyo Pop, you know? So it's like you can, you know, don't worry about it. Don't sweat it.
Yeah, I definitely, obviously, from my personal life, I definitely agree with that.
And I say that a lot, and I say it to everybody. And it's like, and I think, because it's not just like you don't have to be angry. I think if you get too nervous about it, maybe you're defeated and give up, or maybe you just think it's harder than it is, and you don't kind of focus on just the simple things of getting better and doing well. So it's not just like encouragement. I think it's kind of sound advice to have the right mindset, because the mindset's so important. You know, you have to kind of be cool in a sense. And you know, like that you can. So if you're interacting with an editor who might hire you for whatever job it is, it's like, hey, I can trust this guy type of thing. We've talked about that a lot in kind of past podcasts. So yeah, just, you know, don't be overwhelmed. And, you know, if you feel that it's this big mystified thing, then, you know, kind of hit the books. So
yeah. Cool.
It'll all kind of start making sense, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was a pretty general how to get into the biz in general advice.
Well, I started very general.
That's good. That's good. Mine is probably just more specific. But this is just one of the things that I see when I see somebody's portfolio.
Well, again, this is what we say, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, mine for number 9 is when you draw a lot of details, don't just draw details for the hell of it. Like, come up with like reasons to do stuff. Like, it doesn't necessarily look better with more detail, right? So you got to know what that detail is actually doing. Number 1. And number 2 is like, and this is both in color and in black and white. It depends on, you know, what you're using. But if you're doing like a lot of different value changes, you know, like a lot of lines here and there, you still need a lot of contrast to ground people. Otherwise, it just keeps looking flat. So a lot of times I'll notice when people use like spot blacks, for instance, that they don't really use spot blacks. They just draw a bunch of lines and stuff, but it's better if they have like, if they're thinking of like a main area where it's dark and a main area where it's light first, and then they start putting in some variations between all of that, you know, but they have to make it so that when you zoom out, you can still see it really well. Like, a lot of people really love Jeff Darrow, who draws a lot of detail, but if you see Jeff Darrow, like, if you do a image search, you'll still be able to tell what's going on when it's a tiny little thumbnail. You know what I mean? And that's because he's still thinking about the big picture. So don't lose sight of the big picture, and possibly think about doing details once you know more about what you're doing. So that's 1 for me. That's number 9.
That's number 9. Number 8, which is kind of interesting, which is something that I tell a lot of people, is working with backgrounds. But just, again, this is conceptually, right? A lot of people work on backgrounds are difficult, right? Because everyone likes doing pinups of their favorite characters, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I want to draw Hulk, or I want to draw Batman, and you draw that all day long, and you get pretty good at that. And they say, well, you have to draw a building or a mailbox or a horse or a police car or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then as they're learning to draw that, it's like it becomes all piecemeal, right? And you know, another advice that you'll always hear that's not on our list, but it's, you know, like life drawing, do figure work, right?
Yeah.
And everything else. But to me, something that I notice a lot when I'm looking at artist portfolios for up and coming artists is that their backgrounds look like backdrops. You know what I mean?
Oh.
It's like, you know, the scene calls for a horse in the background and a mailbox. And so I'll just put a horse and a mailbox in there. But there's no real concept of space. You know what I mean? And it doesn't look like Yeah, I don't know why Batman would be in the scene with a horse in a mailbox, but it doesn't look like he can walk over there and get on that horse and ride it off. It doesn't look like he can go on, drop his mail off before he fights the Joker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're just kind of like, there's just such a flatness and floating there, and that's just a general composition thing. But again, it's they have the philosophy that, you know, they have to be moving through their environment. You know what I mean? And, you know, a lot of that's tricks with perspective. A lot of that is, I don't know if you have this right, where you're varying the, I don't remember. Sometimes I say varying the camera angle, right? Whether you're close or far. Or, you know, I don't like using the word camera because, you know, it's too much of a film term in my mind. But, you know, it's all of those things. But like I said, the background they have to be able to interact with and be able to move through. And so, you know, when you're detailing the background, make sure there's enough space to kind of set the world. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, I remember you saying that when I was kind of early in the game. You made this comment once where you felt that a lot of the animators who sometimes draw comics but mostly animate seem to have that same problem where their backgrounds don't seem to interact with the characters and stuff.
I don't remember saying that, but it kind of makes sense, right?
No, maybe.
They have like static backgrounds and they're just drawing the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean that would be like 2D animation from you know 30 years ago, but
yeah,
you know.
They still do that
Yeah.
these days too.
Yeah. But is that something? So when you first started drawing, you would draw Sailor Moon and that Iceland girl who sings songs.
Bjork.
Yeah. You know, what was it like when you had to put them in a panel and move them around? You know what I mean?
Let's see. I don't know. I mean, it's always super hard. Even to this day, it's super hard. You know, like the hardest thing is when you can see their feet and where they land in the perspective. That's when it gets super hard to make it look right. But, you know, I mean, it's tough. Backgrounds are tough. I wish that more people actually put more emphasis on backgrounds. Like, I kind of wish that somebody would come up to me and show me their portfolio and they drew, like, awesome buildings, because then I could use them. Then they could be my assistant or something. But nobody who wants to get into the biz and isn't quite there yet knows how to draw backgrounds. You know what I mean? Like, that's the last thing anybody ever learns. Or perspective or anything. So, oh well. But it would be great. It'd be good advice, you know. Maybe you could become somebody's assistant if you really took a lot of time and figured out how to render buildings and such.
But to me, it's not just drawing, right? Because then they'll just sit and learn how to draw, and it'll look like a picture of a building, along with a picture of Batman, but they don't go together. So when you're staging something, is it just experience, or you know, is it just repetition?
I guess I don't really understand. Like, I'm not picturing what you're talking about, I guess, but it might just be that they're not good at perspective and don't know how to place a human.
Well, it's like I said, it's
perspective.
It's perspective. It's also just basic composition, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying how to fix it. I'm saying be wary of it. You know what I mean? Where it's like again, it's just you know. Again, like a backdrop, not in the sense of the perspective even necessarily being wrong, but just there's no flow through it. There's no composition that has a direction that moves you through the panel. You know what I mean? Or if there is an action in the panel, it takes place in front of the background rather than within the environment. Yeah. So you know, you can throw something in the foreground and put the action in the midground if you want, or something like that. Like I said, it's so seldom that they're in a space. You know what I mean? It's like a figure in a panel, and whatever else they put in there, like I said, it disconnects. You know what I mean? Yeah. And to me, it's more of a composition.
No, it's
issue.
Interesting though. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm gonna look at that now when I'm looking through people's portfolios and stuff. Let's see. So number 7, I find that a lot of people, they use reference and they don't use it in the right way, and so it becomes that their art is very inconsistent. These are people who are really good at figure drawing actually, and might do a lot of that sort of thing, typically, but so they're good at realism and copying and stuff. But they have no confidence in coming up with something in their own minds. But they actually, instead of like trying to force themselves just to work through it, they rely on what they're good at which is copying, and then it's just like, then I have to worry about, like, it just looks really different from panel to panel, basically, because they'll take a photo and they'll just basically draw it at the exact same angle and everything, and then the next panel they make up in their own heads, and there's this huge difference. There are a lot of artists who use reference, but they do it well because they're processing what they're looking at. It's not literal. They're taking a look at it and they kind of see how somebody might be situated, and then they process it in their minds as how they're going to use it, like in a 3D space. It might even be at a different angle, and it definitely has a different face. You know what I mean? So yeah, just try your best to, like, not use reference unless it's for learning. Like, don't put it in your comics. Just learn, be bad first. Allow yourself to be bad first and come up with things out of your own head.
Yeah, because even good artists who use a ton of reference, patching it together is almost an art form. You know what I mean? And I don't even mean that to be romantic. It's like you got to do a really good job at being able to use that much reference.
And some
in
people
a single
are.
panel.
Some people can.
That's
do
what I'm
it.
saying. Like,
but
they're
for
amazing.
me, it's harder. Like,
Yeah.
that's so much harder to be looking outside of yourself.
Right.
To make things, like, it takes so much more time to research it
And to
then,
find the disparate parts to...
it's...
But what about SketchUp? I mean, I would have known nothing about it, but can you move stuff around better in SketchUp? And have you ever...
I tried
seen
SketchUp. It was kind of frustrating. I used it for this, like, circular staircase that was in Batwoman, when they're, like, under the water in this sea vessel or something. Just because it was really hard for me to figure out how stairs work in a circle. But yeah, besides that, I didn't really use it. I know people who do, and they'll create scenes that they kind of move their characters around in.
Sure.
And so it's less about drawing human bodies, which is mostly what I'm talking about. And it's more about just putting them in the right space. Let's see. I think that's fine if you're a weathered artist. If you're new to art, I feel like it might just become a crutch for you, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't really know, because I haven't really done it that much. But it seems like it would save a lot of time and it'd make you picture things a lot easier, so...
Obviously, I'm not familiar,
Yeah, I mean, like, can you imagine, like, being able to just go, okay, what's the best angle I could show this at? And you can literally move it around and imagine different things instead of, like, pulling your hair out trying to picture something
But
in
how
your
do you
head.
get the basic model? I mean, can you take, it's a human figure and they'll move it around? I mean, but like you said, a spiral staircase, how'd you get that into to SketchUp? Or is it like, does it come with it? You know what I mean?
No, I had to create an object, and I can't even think of how I did it. It sounds really hard now.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, you can, like, just cut certain parts of it and push it in or take it out. And
You should have just changed the script and made like an elevator or something. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I made that up, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just thought it would look cool. But...
You know what's really cool?
What?
Spiral staircases in underwater ships.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway...
Anyway, moving on, or anyway you have more to say?
Yeah, you can move on.
Number 6, this would be, right? It's something that I see a lot in writers' scripts. I see it's in a lot of professional people too, so, maybe this is just my opinion, but I think it's especially good advice for new writers because you don't have a lot of time to impress people. You know what I mean? And if you get a new book, you don't, you're not like, I'll be on this book for 30 issues, and you'll be doing a fill-in, you'll be doing a short story, and don't do it. Which is, cutting up dialogue between two characters into multiple panels. I call it call and answer, which is a religious term, right? Which is like,
Oh, yeah, it is,
like
right?
in church, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
You say something, blah, 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 peace be with you, and then the crowd goes, and also with you, right? So you see it in a lot where it's, say, Batman and Robin are having a discussion, and panel 1 is a close-up on Batman. It goes, Robin, I have something horrible to tell you. And panel 2 is Robin's reaction, again, as a solo close-up. Batman, what is it? Panel 3 is Batman, it's Joker, he's alive again. And panel 4 is Robin saying, oh, my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know what I mean?
Oh,
it's like
okay.
that could be one panel with 4 balloons. And not only do you save space, that you would also be able to show them interacting with each other, which to me is so much more effective than having just one emotion and calling. And like I said, and it's just,
Yeah. That makes sense.
to me, it's more than the sum of its parts, actually, even though it's less panels. Like, you do want emphasis sometimes where it's like, you do want a reaction or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, comics are getting shorter. And, especially if you're working on a new book or, again, you don't know how long you're going to have on it. You don't want to just spend so much time with, like I said, one person saying something, one panel, and then one person in a response. And, when you have an artist like Amyreeder doing a book for you, you say, no, you really want them to be interacting. You want their physical and the visual interaction of them to be something unique to add to the conversation. And I think 9 times out of 10, you get more from having two people interact than just a reaction shot.
Well, here's what I think about that, because I've heard you say that to a lot of people, and I know it's your opinion and stuff, and I feel a little divided about it. I feel like it's good advice, especially if somebody really is sort of like just going back and forth in that way. I think, though, that it's way harder to draw a comic like visually. You have to make sure that each page, like, it's better if you have some of the time where they're there together, but that you break it up and you have one close-up of one character and one close-up of the other character if there's discussions being done. Like, in each page, I really believe that there should be, a couple close-ups where there's just a singular character. Where it seems like you really like as many times as possible to have both characters in there interacting. And I tend to change that here and there because it's hard to draw, and it also can look kind of repetitive visually.
Well, there you go. 2 different opinions.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. Well, you're not a writer, but if you are as established as a writer, you're given more leeway, you're given more room. That's fine. But like I said, when your first story is going to be, you're lucky if it's a one shot, not just 8 pages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's and you want to do some of that stuff. It's like, no, spend more time on it. And I think you can keep 2 people in a panel and make it visually interesting. I think if you have a full page of people talking or multiple pages of people talking, you're not making comics, right? You know what I mean? Unless, not if it's an action book, you know what I mean? So it's you want to kind of, you want them to have their moments though, but like I say, wrap it up. We just did a scene with in Rocket Girl, right? With the 2 teen cops in the future, LaShawn and Dayung, right? So they're outside, and I think they're talking back and forth, and you pick a moment for a close-up and a reaction, but just, it's, or a soliloquy if you need it, then, not that it's technically a soliloquy, but something where somebody's going to say something and they're isolated. It's not about the interaction, it's about what she's saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I'll actually say, and this kind of supports your how you feel that it should be done and stuff, that a lot of times when I do those scenes, if I do a close-up on somebody, a lot of times it's not even them speaking to the other person, it's the other person speaking to them.
Right.
And then that, in that sense, it is still kind of like both of them are on the same panel, and you're just kind of zooming in on the reaction of the other person. So actually, I mean, like, in that sense, I know what you're talking about. And I'm sure when you're getting into writing comics, it's really difficult to decide how you want it to really be paced, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's not even padding. I think people think that it's a more effective zinger moment, you know what I mean? Like, oh my God, you know what I mean? But it's you don't, it'll flow better.
That reminds me of, like, when people do panels that are, like, they have an interruption, and then the interruption is then the next panel. That's, like, my biggest pet peeve, where somebody's like, yeah, but, dash, and then the next person's like, no, you can't, in the next panel or something. And
yeah, it should be in that panel, right? Otherwise,
like, that's like a huge pet peeve for me.
I invented the overlapping balloon, by the way.
You invented it?
Nobody ever did it before me. I remember having to mark it. I'm sure you'll find 10,000 examples.
I did,
but
without you.
I don't think so. I also invented filling blank computer screens with, like, a letter, like the 0-1 letter effect, because it's like, well, you gotta put something on those screens. I also invented the glow effect on Dr. Light with Guy Major. I said, hey man, why don't you make the white parts of his costume glow? And I also named Dexstar, the Red Lantern cat. So,
well, you are a hotshot, aren't you? You're pretty amazing.
I've done a lot. I've contributed.
Brandon's the bomb. All right, shall I move on to number 5? This is
Halfway there.
yeah, we're getting there. So yeah, like this is one thing that a lot of people might get from editors and stuff. People saying that their anatomy is stiff. That can mean so many different things, okay? So I'm going to tell you the top 2 things that can actually mean, because it can mean
That you're bad at anatomy.
that you're bad at anatomy, but a lot of times the people who have stiff anatomy, their proportions are right, even the individual body parts are all right, but there's a couple things that can be true for you if people believe that your anatomy is stiff. One is that you never foreshorten. And foreshortening, a lot of times people think that just means like a hand coming out at you and it gets really huge when it comes out at you. That's really extreme perspective. It's also foreshortening, but it's foreshortening plus extreme perspective.
Forced, yeah.
Yeah, foreshortening just means like when people are talking to you and stuff, they're constantly, parts of their body are getting shorter as they talk to you. Parts of them are coming towards you, so they won't be as long. And so if you don't have that, then it looks super jointed and like sideways, everything does. And that can make it look really stiff. And another thing that a lot of people who are said that they have stiff anatomy have a problem with is clothing folds. It's actually not the anatomy, it's how they draw clothing, because a lot of times just where they have the clothing at the joints, it's like straight looking, and then at the joints it's like kind of zigzaggy, and they haven't really thought too much about how to draw clothes. So I would recommend like getting a book on clothing folds, preferably one that renders using line instead of value.
What if they're wearing skin tight Wolverine shirts? You know what I mean? And like, Fantastic Four unstable molecule uniforms. No clothes.
That helps, that helps the problem. Obviously, still, though, that you could do some better things about it. Like a lot of times people just make straight lines, like say there's like muscles and stuff. They think more about drawing the muscle lines instead of maybe drawing some folds, like maybe Frank Quietly might do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's still, like, you could think a little more about how spandex works.
Yeah, it's funny if you want, a sidebar, right? If you want to look at people who kind of make more fabric-y uniforms, right? And it's, you mentioned Frank Wiley, Paul Pope, definitely, what I mean? Where it's like, and I think everyone's kind of, goes through things. You really do have the less of the painted-on spandex and more of it is some kind of material.
Yeah. Fiona Staples is really good at drawing men in pants, because men's pants are so hard to draw. And a lot of comic artists don't know how to do it, even though they know how to draw men, because they never have to draw them in pants.
All right.
So, just FYI. But yeah, okay, you go to your thing.
I'll go to my thing, which is an art thing. And Amy might disagree with this also, although
this
this
is a one you say a lot.
I say it a lot because it's I'm amazed that people don't do it, and I think Amy used to resist how often I said it. But I actually think you agree with me now, although you're going to be contrary.
You brainwashed me, so I do it.
No, I mean I see I see so many pro artists do it also, and it boggles my mind. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm better, not that I have some kind of secret knowledge. It's just so apparent to me, and that is, always have the action move from left to right. You know what I mean? That's how people read. That's how panels go. If it's a panel that spans the entire horizontal, move it left to right. You know what I mean? Because it's just otherwise, if you have consistent action, and this is about action. You know what I mean? If they're running up a spiral staircase in an underwater fortress or whatever it was, maybe you can play with that type of stuff. But I mean, just always default moving left to right. Not just obviously panels go left to right, but the action in the panel. So whether you're punching somebody in the face, punch him from the left and have the guy who's getting hit move to the right. You know what I mean? Or if you're racing a car, have it going from left to right and everything else. And it's and certainly if it is continuous action, don't flip the axis, right? Don't have in panel 1 them going left to right, driving the Batmobile, and then in panel 2 it's going in the opposite direction. You do a reverse angle, you know what I mean? Because it takes away all the sense of motion, and comics should be a sequence, right? And it should give the effect of motion. And you need, and like I said, instinctually you read left to right even if it was a prose novel. So just keep mapping it. But there's so much stuff where it's like I said, they have action that moves, you know, right to left, and to me you start at the top left of the page, you end at the bottom right.
Yeah.
And the bottom right page should lead you into the next one. So if you have your last panel, even if you want to say a 9-panel grid, and someone's getting kicked, and they're kicking the guy, and it's going from right to left, you don't want to turn the page. You want to go back into the previous panel. It doesn't make any sense. You have to control, if you're an artist, control the reader's eye. And, you know, if you do weird things, it's just not going to work, you know?
Yeah.
And so I say it a lot, and it's like amazing. I was, you know, you read perennial bestsellers, and it's like, you know, again, they just flip the axis.
I think that's maybe the main reason that I believe that most comics these days seem so unreadable. Like, where I don't know what's going on is probably because they have direction problems.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like, you know, again, there's exceptions to be sure, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's
I
times
use
to
a
do
lot
it.
of exceptions because I do follow your advice in general, but I do tend to move people backwards if the panel is going, like, the panel above was on the top right, and then there's something on the bottom left. They're doing like a
You try to
carriage
do like
return.
a Z or
Yeah, I do little things like that. But whenever there's like an extreme motion, like you say, like a punch, I never put it in a panel where you would have to go backwards. You know what I mean? Like, I always make it something is going to move people forwards.
Yeah, I mean, just logically, because if you're controlling the reader's eye, you're taking them back to the previous panel. You know, you should always be moving them to the next panel.
Yeah.
So left and down, you know? I'm sorry, left to right and down, so to the right and down. And, you know, like I said, professional artists in published comics every month do it more than they should.
Yeah.
And I've never suggested to, like, on any book, like, you know me when I worked as an editor, I won't say, oh, you have to change it and be some kind of hard ass, but I'd say, hey, what if we flip that panel? Literally go in Photoshop and you flip it. And I don't think I've ever gotten resistance. Everyone always says, oh, yeah, that's better, you're right, I should flip it. You know?
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. So, yeah, you know, you don't put up a fight. You used to say, no, you don't always have to do that. And it's like, you know, I don't mean, like I said, I don't mean to be like a hard ass about it, but it's just, you know, it's so often jarring. Like I said, I really don't even understand how one wouldn't see it, you know?
True story, that Batwoman cover I did that's a close-up of her putting on her mask was flipped at first. I drew the whole thing flipped, colored it all the way, and then realized that it would look better.
And it's funny, because I think I said, oh, no, I like it the way it is. And it would be like something that I would always say to flip.
I don't know that you even commented on it, but then when I flipped it, you were like, you thought that was hilarious. That you didn't even tell me, and
I have
did
a
it, and it
theory
was better.
that it's that most artists are left-handed, and their brain, for whatever reason, just stops functioning for a minute, and they think it's
I wish most artists were left-handed, but they're not. Most are right-handed. I'm a lefty, but
I only work with left-handed artists.
Like?
You and I think Shane's left-handed.
No, he's a righty.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh well, there goes my theory.
And seriously, there's not a lot of lefty artists.
I'm trying to think. I think
more,
actually
but...
Clued a righty. I'm trying to remember people. You know, I don't know. I think Shane's a lefty. I'm pretty sure he is.
I don't think so.
All right, we'll find out.
Alrighty, so my turn.
No, Shane's definitely a left-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no idea. I'm just trying to be demonstrative.
Find out. I don't think it's true though. My thing is kind of related to yours for number 3, because you were talking about like direction. And by the way, I talk a lot about the direction of a panel in my perspective tutorials, which you can find on my Tumblr. So take a look at those.
Amyreeder comics or Amyreeder? What's
just amyreeder.tumblr.com, and I have like some link on the main page that has like highlights of the Tumblr or something, and there's some links to it there. It's a lot of reading, and it's super useful if you're just trying to think of angles for things that will help move and a lot of it's about moving the comic forward, but it's also about doing it to serve the purpose of the story. Let's see here. So yeah, my number 3 is how to frame panels. So less about direction and more just like when I notice people's pages that they give me in their portfolio, it just doesn't look good. Like looking right at it, the layout of it doesn't look good, and it's not where the panels are. It's really what's inside of the panels that makes it just not look right. Some of that's like repetitive angles and stuff, but in a lot of ways, people need to work on how they're going to frame stuff. So some people zoom in too close to the point where you can't tell what's going on. So make sure that clarity comes first. So zoom out a little bit, just so that people have a frame of reference on what you're showing. But then a lot of other people, they zoom out so much that it gets like it feels too station to station, right?
Like the David Bowie song?
Which one?
The David Bowie song, Starman.
Whatever. I don't even know what you're talking about.
There's a David Bowie
I was in
song
the middle of
called
something.
Station to Station.
Okay, that's good to know. All right. Oh, it's a motorcycle. Do you hear that? Do you hear that, pod kernels? All right, so anyway, I was talking about something. Oh, yeah. So one thing that I sometimes will notice on people...
You were talking about something.
Stop it! Oh, all right. So one thing that I notice is that people, like, are afraid of cropping the top of the head. They feel like the head has to be like the perfect third or whatever, where it's in like the 2/3 of the thing, and then you don't show the top of the head. Crop that head a lot of times. Don't worry about it being cropped, not
People
cropped.
I think young artists are worried about cropping everything.
Yeah.
You know? Like they don't want an elbow off panel. They don't want a hand.
They spend so much time like trying to compose it. And one thing that really helps is just drawing thumbnails, and really like kind of fleshing that out while it's small and figuring out how to do that. But
But yeah, don't be afraid to crop. Don't a lot of people say, and this is true, right? Don't crop at a joint because then it'll look weird.
Oh, that's a good
But
point.
but otherwise don't meaning don't crop at the wrist exactly or the or the forearm or the the knee or something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so I mean that seems like a funny thing, but like just do yourself a favor, and when you're looking at comics, think about what they chose to show, and how close in they went and stuff like that. All right, take it away, Brandon, for number 2.
Number 2
which is his top one.
Which is my top one, which would have had a nice envelope structure had I gotten to go first and last, but
okay,
I lost the coin toss.
Yeah.
For writers, learn to write short, 8 pages, stories, good exercises. You don't get hung up. You get to move on. A lot of people are just too long with what they do, and that's like kind of 2 things. One, from craft, if you can do a story in 8 pages, you could do it in 20 for sure, and an editor will realize that. But the second thing is that your break, your gig, 9 times out of 10 is going to be assigned to you. You can say 10 times out of 10 if it's at Marvel or DC, where they're not going to say, "Oh, give me a pitch for Swamp Thing," and if it's great, you're going to get in that way. You're going to have hopefully a relationship with an editor and who likes your stuff and kind of sees your portfolio or sees your self-published things or whatever it is. And you're going to get an opportunity where it's like, you know what? I need a fill-in on the Atom, or I need a 8-page backup with, Lex Luthor for Superman. And you're just going to have to take that assignment and be done with it. You know what I mean? And you're not going to get to do your 40-part epic
Opus.
Reinvention of Plastic Man. You know what I mean? It's like, down the road, hopefully, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not even like expectations. It's like, just be prepared to write short and be flexible, and I think it's good that if things aren't that precious, I think it's good that if you're developing stuff, you move on, you know? And I'll say this, a lot of places like, obviously Image, but even Boom or IDW that do creator-owned stuff, they will buy a pitch, but again, I think you're going to have a relationship with these editors where it's like, oh, Dark Horse might like your stuff and say you might be ready for something, but they'll probably test you out on an 8-page creepy story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Dark Horse Presents or something like that. And again, it's still gonna be most of the time.
Well,
Here's something short to get in there, so you better be good at it and know how to do it.
Well, you don't even want to start on your opus anyway, because you got to get good first.
Well, yeah, but most people do.
I know, but I'm saying my corollary to what you're saying is
Right. If you
really
have a good idea, save it.
Yeah, just save it for
Save
when
it.
you get better. You know, there's no reason to do your opus now. Like, just keep getting better. You got to practice.
Says Amy, whose first professional gig was like, you know, they gave you 450 pages at Tokyo Pop, but you needed like, I need more. I need to do like, I need 600 pages. You know?
Yeah, but the concept itself was pretty simple to begin with. I just made it too crazy.
Yeah,
But
well,
like I had tried to pitch my opus and didn't get to do it. And it would have been a nightmare, like trying to put it all together. It would have been a complete nightmare, and I'm glad it didn't work out. So, plus, you know, like, you don't get as many good deals when you're getting into the biz, so like people aren't going to be able to, like, you know, you might not have a good, maybe they'll make a movie of it and make a ton of money off of you, and, you know, wait till you can call the shots a little. All right, so number 1.
Chris Robinson should be inserting a drum roll.
Okay.
Is that your cat?
That's my drums, duh. All right. So yeah, this is the one that, like, honestly, it's like my extra number 1. Like, all those other ones aren't nearly as close to this number 1.
Wouldn't an extra number 1 be 2?
No, this is like the best number 1. It's like the clear winner. Except I will say that I haven't even talked this whole time about drawing faces and good acting, because I just feel like that's what I always say, so that's probably number 1. But let's forget about all that. Number 1 that I talk to people about is sketching right. I feel like this is huge. I feel like most people, the problems that they have are because they don't know how to sketch right. And that what that means is they aren't loose, they aren't light, they're not experimenting. They're just committing too early to lines.
What do you even mean by sketch? When you're roughing something out, or
when you're roughing something out, yeah. Like
not like, oh, I'm just practicing drawing and I'm sketching, or is it the same thing?
No, it's different.
We're talking about layouts and roughs.
I guess, but I'm not really talking about layouts. I'm talking about when people draw a face or they draw a body, they need to draw really rough and really light.
Like a layout.
But it's not when you say a layout, it sounds like sequential art.
Like an underdrawing.
It's just whatever.
I don't understand. I don't know what you mean by
how do you
sketch.
not know what you... yes, it's like a layout, I guess. Yeah. I just explained it to you. But, like, yeah, you should just have... You gotta be really light. You can't feel too, like, stuck to your page or committed to it. Just don't be afraid of being rough first, because a lot of people like to get into details as soon as possible because they feel self-conscious about their work. They're not sure if they'll be able to pull it off, and the sooner they go into detail, they feel, the sooner they'll be able to know that, yes, this is actually going to look good.
Well, what is your specific process, and how is it, why is it the way it is in terms of keeping you loose?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I draw thumbnails, and they start out like just chicken scratches. I don't know how to draw a perfect circle. Not everybody who's an artist means that they can draw a perfect circle. You know, I draw a lot of little chicken scratchy circles around and around and around until it starts to look like a circle. And I'm using that as a comparison for general things that you try and draw. You know, Yeah, you just gotta go general to specific. Or like if you were to draw a face, right? You can't just start out with one eye and go into full detail. You have to keep going back and forth between each eye and keep adding pieces of detail simultaneously on each side. Otherwise, it will look inconsistent.
What if it's a cyclops?
Well, if it's a cyclops, then I guess you could go into detail on that one eye. But if I were you, I would still keep doing detail on the rest of the face and the body and everything, and just basically keep working on each part until it all gets finished, together, instead of one at a time.
And you think people don't do that sometimes?
I think almost all the time that is what keeps them from learning to become better, because they don't experiment, they don't feel free enough when they're drawing. And I think it's also, when I was talking before about stiff anatomy, it's the other reason that you might have stiff anatomy, or even stiff faces, or anything that when people say things look stiff, is because you're not loose enough when you're sketching. So I mean, like it's like a huge deal. Just draw some eye sockets when you're drawing a face really quickly and really softly, and draw like a big hole where the mouth is. You know what I mean? Get everything in the right place, and then start doing more details, because that's what's going to inspire you. And sometimes when I do all this scritchy sketching, you actually like see images in it. It's like seeing like a picture in clouds, and it can inspire you,
Do you ever get messages, like secret messages from
No.
supernatural forces?
No. I guess I'm not a good enough sketcher. Oh well. Well,
Those are 10 things.
That's it. So I hope you guys got some valuable information.
We called them
from
top
that.
10, but I'm sure we could, change the order or add stuff in, so.
Yeah, probably.
But not necessarily the most important things, common things we say a lot.
Yeah, the things we say the most.
Frequently asked questions, kind of, although they're not questions.
Frequently given answers.
Oh.
Hey.
FGA.
FGA. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening, guys, and may you draw and write on forever.
That's right. You can find me at Bmontclare on Twitter.
And me at Amyreeder, Reeder, on Twitter. And Chris Robinson, who is our,
Man behind
MC
the
of
curtain.
sorts. Yeah, helps us.
MC Robinson.
Yeah, MC Robinson, at Chris Robinson. So take a look at him as well. He's getting big in the comics biz.
I didn't write an outro, but, whatever.
La 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 outro.